those fines back into the coffers.
I call the honourable member Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. It's a pleasure to speak to Part 2 of the Courts and Criminal Matters Bill, which, as others have said, is about amendments to the Land Transport Act 1988. And in particular, people have focused on the provisions around driver's licence stop orders. Now, as others have said, we think this is a very sensible provision, and it inserts a number of sections into the Land Transport Act to authorise the imposition of these driver licence stop orders. What it will mean is that people can have their driver's licence suspended if they have not had made arrangements to pay overdue traffic penalties. But it's important to note that wasn't seen as the penalty in itself. The DLSO, the driver's licence stop order, is not a penalty in itself like in some overseas regimes, but an incentive for the proactive resolution of overdue traffic fines. And I understand that similar schemes have been operating in Australia and have been working successfully, and it's always good, I have to say, to be able to find examples of similar jurisdictions where something has been tried out and you can actually weigh up whether it's beneficial or not. And so that's a very positive thing, and it's good to see that we've been able to pick up this idea. Now, the measure has the following features. A warning notice will be given to people 14 days to resolve their traffic penalties before their licence is suspended, and hopefully that will give people quite a major jolt, really. I mean, living as I do in Auckland, being without a car in the current environment of limited public transport options would make it very difficult. And most people are still, I'm afraid to say, reliant on their car to get to their workplace and therefore to earn the income they need to live on. That is, of course, if they are lucky enough to have a job, which sadly too many Aucklanders and too many New Zealanders don't, because of the unemployment situation and the lack of government action on jobs. But going back to Part 2 in the Land Transport Act, suspending driver's licences held by people in default, including limited licences. So, in fact, the point I was making about work, this would actually also suspend licences that people in other situations might get to be able to travel from their home to their workplace. In fact, these would also be suspended and would prevent people from obtaining a licence during the time they were subject to the DLSO. So, the good thing is, of course, if the person actually pays the overdue fines, then immediately their driver's licence is restored to them, unless during that period it expires during the period, and then obviously they wouldn't have a licence at that stage. Importantly as well, person driving in breach of a DLSO would have their vehicle impounded for 28 days. Again, that's quite a stiff penalty, and I think will make people think seriously about whether or not they would do this. Now, one of the things that I thought was quite interesting was apparently the committee were interested in the advice of the New Zealand Police, that it's their policy to waive infringements for expired warrant of fitnesses or for outdated registrations of 1 month or less, where the fault was remedied in a timely manner, and felt that this policy of compliance incentive, like encouraging the person to go and get their warrant of fitness or their registration, was a very good practice, and I agree with that. I think that the committee are absolutely right on that. And apparently the same is true for parking infringements, although I didn't quite understand how that works. Somebody might like to tell me who was on the committee. Now, I understand, though, that there came a difference of opinion on this matter, however, where the Labor members wanted to use the legislation to regularise the waiver policy that we've just talked about, which does seem like good common sense, but unfortunately it seems that that idea was opposed by the National Party members. I believe that they went on to signal, though, that they might advance such a provision in future legislation, and we'd like to certainly ensure that that happens, because it does seem like a very sensible policy to give people that little shove or incentive, if you like, to become compliant. So these changes to the Land Transport Act 1998 are actually quite significant ones. They are quite well structured and also provide fairly major signals to people about the seriousness of paying their traffic fines. And I noted earlier that my colleague, the Honourable Rick Barker, who has, as others have noted, had a very major part in this Courts and Criminal Matters Bill and deserves congratulations for that, has had traffic fines, as have I. It would be interesting to hear about others' experience.
I'm waiting for the member to call. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the member. I call